Hi YouTube, Darth here. Welcome to CTE Sunday, where I run down all the latest changes in the Battlefield 4 community test environment. I didn't publish an episode last Sunday, so today's will cover both weeks. There were continuing tweaks to the Shanghai night map and a host of other changes that I'll cover in today's video. As a reminder, if you're interested in playing on the CTE and you have premium, you can always sign up from the link I'll put in the description below. First up, the developers continue to work on the nighttime version of the Siege of Shanghai map, which is named Infiltration of Shanghai. In addition to cosmetic lighting adjustments and bug fixes, there were some pretty serious gameplay switch-ups in this edition of the map. Most notably, parachute spawns were disabled, the rooftop spawns at Charlie were removed, and most of the tanks on the map were replaced with infantry fighting vehicles. Slightly afterwards, DICE acknowledged that there are probably too many IFVs on the map, and they've replaced most of these with quads, jeeps, and MRAPs. The ultimate effect is that we have a rendition of Shanghai that plays out quite a bit differently, with far less emphasis on armor and no rooftop camper presence. In fact, the out-of-bounds area now extends to any area above the 4th floor. Getting back to light vehicles, now players can melee light vehicles in order to move them. Much like if your boat gets caught on the land, if your light vehicle somehow gets caught on the ground, this will help you to push it out of the way. This change covers vehicles like the quad bike, ATVs, and motorcycle. I'm not too terribly sure how useful this will be, but it's definitely a welcome change. For the really big jobs like stuck tanks and IFVs, you're still going to have to use something a lot bigger. There was an enormous change to the way the aircraft operate in this patch. If you're not familiar with the last few CTE prototypes with core air gameplay, DICE has removed the 313 paradigm where the best turning rate was achieved at 313 knots. In previous CTE iterations, jet turning speed was modified so that the faster velocities produced a faster turning rate but resulted in a wider turn radius because the jet was moving faster. Now DICE has modified the way jets work again so that planes have far less automatic power than they did before. Overall, jets are now slower. What this means is the players who can correctly apply the right amounts of speed under the right circumstances will be rewarded rather than trying to constantly keep the jet at perfect speed. While I had fun with this mechanic, I have to say that in practice it looks ridiculous. There were a lot of times when the jets were just floating balloons and other times where the jets simply lost power for reasons I don't think either pilot could put their fingers on. It definitely encourages the correct as opposed to consistent application of speed, but I don't know if this is the solution for which everybody is looking. As an example of some of the maneuvering possible with this, I present to you one of the few times that I have pulled off what I call the Maverick, whereby you cut power and let the enemy fly right on by you. If you don't get the reference, then I'll put the appropriate link in the description below. My point is, it's a ridiculous maneuver that should never work but is actually quite feasible under the new jet mechanics. The final pieces of the head glitch prototype are coming together, and the prototype, which was at first only applied to a few guns, now applies to all guns in the Battlefield 4 CTE. The fix is to lower the height at which bullets emerge from the player to match the weapon rather than shooting the bullets from the player's perspective, which is their eyes in Battlefield 4. The piece we were missing before was an indication of when you were behind cover if your bullets were actually going to be able to shoot over said cover or if they would go into it. DICE has now added a lowered gun animation to indicate this no-go situation. Now I don't think that the gun lowering animation is perfect, as it definitely conflicts with the lean animation in some situations, and it doesn't apply to aiming down sights, but it does give a better idea of when you're going to fail. It's also not a terribly obvious animation. I think a lot of players will miss it in the heat of battle. That being said, it's probably as good as we're going to get in Battlefield 4, and it's definitely a prototype that has really come along since being first introduced. While this is one of the prototypes that isn't going to be in the winter patch coming out in early March, I'm definitely hopeful that it isn't far off. Next up, there was a small tweak to the quantity of passengers that transport vehicles can handle. DICE upped the number of passengers held by the transport helicopter, MRAP, and RIBS by 1. I think everybody can agree this is a nice change for both squads that like to play with each other and for players who like to get a huge boon of kills when downing a transport helicopter or RIB. At the very least, it'll allow for one more spot for players who maybe just want to use the helicopter as a quick deploy spot over the battlefield. As a small Valentines present to the community, DICE added the Valentines camouflage to the game by replacing the existing DICE camo. It's a lovely assortment of hearts and pinkness that's sure to impress all your enemies. I actually kind of like this in a way, and I'm actually kind of hoping that it comes back as a premium camo sometime later in the year. I think it'd be a fun way to poke humor at your enemies. I mean, hey, what says I'm the boss more than dominating your enemies in a pink heart-covered tank? Next up is two things the players have been asking DICE to provide for quite some time. Now through the options menu, you can turn off soldier leaning and you can turn off the automatic parachute deploy. You can turn off automatic soldier leaning in the PC retail version of Battlefield 4 by going into your config file and searching for getinput.leanin enabled and setting that to 0. Now this new menu option allows people who aren't so inclined or don't play on a PC to do that through the game options. As for the parachute deploy, you'd see the automatic parachute deploy on Obliteration, the train on Goal Mode Railway, and of course when deploying on the radio beacon from the Recon class. Turning this option off now lets you plummet to the earth, and you can choose when to deploy your chute. Alternatively, if you deploy too late, you can now become a human pancake that much more easily. As with every week, there were a few smaller tweaks. This week, DICE removed the automatic blinking ammo icon from soldiers that didn't require weapon ammo, the targets on the test range have been given normal soldier health and damage multipliers, flashlights were made more effective at night, and there were some terrain deformation timing fixes. That's it for this week on the community test environment. If you're new around here, please take a moment to check out my channel and consider subscribing. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.